Sorry that I can't be with you directly or personally this week, but I have to be out of town. However, I did want to have the opportunity to share with you some reflections on this question of human suffering and the sovereignty of God and how a biblical worldview responds to that. So it seems to me there's really three words that help us in this regard. One is compassion, the other is control, and the other is contrition. First of all, when I mention compassion, what's in view there is that if we have a biblical worldview, we understand that the Bible tells us to always come into the context of human suffering with compassion. Remember, Paul said in Romans 12, "Weep with those who weep." So when people are suffering and hurting, that ought to be our first response. We ought to communicate the love of God to them. We ought to have a sense of compassion for their sorrow and for their pain. In fact, in the throes of affliction and in the immediacy of pain, that's probably not the best time to teach theology. But it is certainly a time to come alongside people and pray for them and pray with them and point them to the love and care of God. But it is learning theology and treasuring it at other times in our life so that when the afflictions come, we're prepared to be comforted through truth. So having compassion is important, but ultimately we want to be people who have learned good theology so that truth is our comfort in the midst of affliction. So the first word is compassion. The second word is control. And by that I mean that we need to remind ourselves, even in the most difficult moments, that God is in control. You may remember that Jesus said, "Look, are not 2 sparrows sold for merely a penny? And yet not one of them falls to the ground without your Father." God's control touches the details of our lives in a way that is mysterious and even perplexing. So we wonder, why would God ordain things in our lives that are difficult and painful? We have to understand that that's not the whole picture. There's a bigger spectrum. We have the small picture, but God alone has the big picture. And so in our limited perspective, we often puzzle over the pain that we experience because we lose sight of the fact that God has a bigger picture, a larger perspective, and a greater purpose, and He is working toward that end. And so there is comfort, while on the one hand there's perplexity in seeing and experiencing the pain of immediate affliction. There is also great comfort in knowing that this pain is not some random effect in a world of causes over which God has no control. So instead we remind ourselves that God is in control and He has larger purposes than the ones I can see right now. And so by faith I will trust God for those things that I cannot now understand. So I trust in the character of God when I cannot see fully the purposes of God. The third word is contrition. That is, to have an attitude of humility before God, so that knowing, or to say that differently, not knowing the full spectrum of God's purposes, I need to have my heart humbled before Him and say, this is the God who spoke the universe into existence, and this is the God who sent His Son to die for me. And so I will humble myself and wait upon His purpose and not jump to conclusions about what this affliction means. And I will not put God in the dock, that is, put Him on trial because of the discomforts of my life. But I will humble myself knowing that God has a purpose bigger than my pain, and ultimately will be a purpose that will issue in my joy and His glory. So, these are some of the ways that a biblical worldview informs our response to human affliction. So how are you doing with that? Is that being lived out in your life? Are you able to think this way? Well, I hope that this cycle of men's discipleship this fall will move all of us further in that direction. Thanks. Great to talk to you.